Amid the dramatic event, shocking event occurred, shaking the relationship between the main characters. Tate Black, in a fit of rage, knocked out Doug Williams III right in front of Holly Jonas, creating an unforgettable turning point in their story. The story unfolds with Holly Jonas and Doug Williams III sharing a candid moment at a secluded cabin. Doug, harboring deep feelings for Holly, musters the courage to confess his affection. While Holly appreciates Doug's honesty, she gently reminds him of her commitment to Tate Black, her current boyfriend, affirming that Tate remains the man she desires. This heartfelt exchange leaves Holly with a sense of happiness about Doug's feelings, but also reinforces her loyalty to Tate. Despite Holly's reassurances, Tate begins to grapple with insecurities regarding Holly's relationship with Doug. His unease is further exacerbated by Doug's checkered past, including time spent in prison. Tate's concerns about Doug's moral compass lead him to openly criticize Doug, highlighting his questionable ethics and criminal history. However, Holly stands firm in defense of her friend, refusing to allow Tate to disparage Doug without cause. The stolen necklace revelation, the tension reaches a boiling point when Julie Williams' cherished necklace goes missing. Suspicion initially falls on Stephen Olson, but as the investigation unfolds, it becomes evident that Doug III is the true culprit. Doug's involvement in the theft is driven by mounting debts and a desperate attempt to resolve his financial woes. This revelation not only shatters Julie's trust, but also ignites a firestorm of emotions within the community. Fueled by anger and a desire to protect Holly, Tate confronts Doug about the stolen necklace. The confrontation escalates rapidly, culminating in Tate physically knocking Doug unconscious. Tate's actions are driven by a mix of betrayal, protectiveness, and frustration over Doug's continuous impact on their lives. He issues a stern ultimatum, demanding that Doug stay away from Holly to prevent further turmoil. Caught between her boyfriend and her friend, Holly faces an emotional quandary. While she understands Tate's protective instincts, she also empathizes with Doug's struggles and believes in his capacity for redemption. Holly's internal conflict is further complicated by her own feelings, as she grapples with the complexities of loyalty, forgiveness, and the nuances of human imperfection. It all started when Julie Williams discovered that her precious necklace was stolen. After a period of investigation, the truth was revealed to be Doug's fault. This action not only hurt Julie but also shocked the entire Salem community. Tate, with her deep loyalty and love for Holly, could not accept that her ex-boyfriend would betray everyone's trust. In a heated confrontation, Tate lost control of his anger and threw a powerful punch, knocking Doug to the ground right in front of Holly. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Doug is left to reckon with the consequences of his actions. His journey toward redemption becomes a focal point, as he seeks to make amends for the pain he has caused. Doug's acknowledgement of his mistakes and his efforts to rectify them highlight the potential for personal growth and the power of forgiveness within the tight-knit community of Salem. After the incident, Doug had to face the serious consequences of his actions. The shame and guilt weighed heavily on his shoulders, especially when facing Julie and Holly, the people he had betrayed. Unable to bear the pressure and judgment of the community, Doug decided to leave Salem, looking for a new start elsewhere, far away from the painful memories he had caused. Doug's departure left many thoughts for the residents of Salem about trust, forgiveness, and the consequences of wrongdoing. This story reminds everyone of the importance of honesty and responsibility in human relationships. Back on Monday episode recap. It was supposed to be a simple evening, a chance for Johnny DiMera and his wife, Chanel, to prove they were ready to welcome a child into their lives. The young couple had spent the car ride home psyching themselves up, rehearsing how they'd show Mrs. Amy Choi, the adoption agency representative, that they were a loving, stable family. Johnny gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening as he pictured their future with a little one toddling around. Chanel fidgeted with her necklace, whispering affirmations to herself. "We've got this. We're ready." They were determined to make a good impression, to show Mrs. Choi that their home was a place of warmth and happiness. But the moment they stepped through the grand oak doors of the DiMera mansion, their dreams collided head-on with a storm of chaos. The air crackled with tension as Johnny and Chanel walked into the foyer, only to be met with a shocking scene. Paulina Price, Chanel's fiery mother, stood toe-to-toe with E.J. DiMera, Johnny's slick and silver-tongued father. Her voice boomed through the high-ceilinged room, sharp enough to rattle the crystal chandelier overhead. "You can go straight to hell, E.J. DiMera," she bellowed, her hands planted firmly on her hips. E.J., ever the picture of cool arrogance, smirked in response, his tailored suit somehow unruffled despite the verbal assault. Johnny and Chanel froze in the doorway, their jaws dropping as they tried to process the explosion unfolding before them. "What in the world is going on?" Johnny demanded, his voice cutting through the shouting match. Chanel, her eyes wide with panic, rushed forward, waving her arms like a referee at a boxing match. "Both of you, quiet down right now," she cried. "Mrs. Choi is on her way, and we need to make a good impression. Please, just stop." Her plea hung in the air, fragile and desperate, as Paulina and E.J. exchanged one last venomous glare before reluctantly stepping back. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the kind that feels like the calm before an even bigger storm. Moments later, the doorbell chimed, its cheerful tone jarring against the tension still simmering in the mansion. Mrs. Amy Choi stepped inside, a petite woman with a clipboard clutched to her chest and a polite but guarded smile. Behind her trailed her teenage daughter, Sophia, and Tate Black, a friend of the family who'd tagged along. Johnny and Chanel plastered on their best welcoming grins, ushering the guests into the sitting room. E.J., ever the charmer when it suited him, straightened his tie and flashed a dazzling smile. "Can I get you a glass of water, Mrs. Choi?" he offered smoothly. "Just water. Nothing fancy." She nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. The small talk started innocently enough. Mrs. Choi, seated stiffly on the edge of a plush armchair, tilted her head and asked E.J., "Are you a religious man, Mr. DiMera?" E.J. leaned back casually, crossing one leg over the other. "My mother is quite devout," he replied with a chuckle. "As for my father, well, nothing matters more to him than eternal life." His tone was light, almost playful, but there was a glint in his eye that made Johnny shift uncomfortably. For a fleeting moment, it seemed like the evening might actually go smoothly. The couple exchanged hopeful glances. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. Then the front door slammed open with the force of a hurricane. Gabby Hernandez and Jada Hunter stormed into the room, their faces twisted with fury. "Where's my brother, you sick bastard?" Gabby shrieked, her voice raw with desperation as she pointed an accusing finger at E.J. The room went deathly still. Sophia, perched on the couch beside Tate, whispered, "What's happening?" Tate shook his head, his brows knitting together. "No clue," he muttered. "But this can't be good." All eyes turned to E.J., who rose slowly, his expression darkening as he faced the intruders. Gabby and Jada didn't hold back. They demanded answers about Rafe Hernandez, Gabby's missing brother, hurling accusations of kidnapping and something about a man named Arnold. Their words tumbled out in a chaotic rush, loud enough for Mrs. Choi to clutch her clipboard tighter, her polite smile vanishing. Johnny grabbed his father's arm and pulled him aside, his voice low and urgent. "Dad, tell me you had nothing to do with this. Please." EJ's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his silence more damning than any denial. Jada, her police instincts kicking in, turned to Johnny. "Take me to the tunnels," she ordered, referring to the infamous network of passages beneath the DiMera estate. Johnny hesitated, glancing at his father, who tried to yank him back with a firm hand on his shoulder. But Johnny shook him off and led Jada downstairs, his heart pounding with dread. Mrs. Choi, now thoroughly rattled, stammered, "Oh my goodness, what's going on here?" as Sophia and Tate exchanged wide-eyed looks. EJ, left alone with the guests, growled under his breath that Gabby and Jada would be gone soon. "My apologies for the interruption," he said smoothly, though his eyes flashed with irritation. Johnny returned moments later, his face flushed with anger. He'd scolded Jada for her recklessness, but his real fury was reserved for his father. "If you had anything to do with the man who raped my mother," he hissed, his voice trembling with emotion, "there's a price to pay, Dad. A big one." The drama didn't end there. Upstairs, the family sat in awkward silence, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Gabby paced like a caged animal, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Johnny started toward the stairs to check on Jada, but she burst back into the room, her expression grim. "No sign of Rafe down there," she announced. EJ seized the moment, rising with a cold authority. "You've overstayed your welcome," he snapped, ushering Gabby and Jada out with a warning glare. "Next time, it's a lifetime in prison." Gabby shot back as the door slammed behind them. Chanel, ever the optimist, forced a bright smile and held up a plate. "Anyone want more cookies?" she chirped. The room remained silent, her cheerful offer falling flat. Mrs. Choi stood abruptly, grabbing Sophia and Tate by the arms. "We're leaving," she declared, brushing off Paulina's frantic attempts at damage control. The trio hurried out, leaving the DiMera family in ruins. Chanel sank onto the couch, her face crumpling as tears spilled down her cheeks. "There's no way we're adopting that baby now," she sobbed, burying her head in her hands. Johnny knelt beside her, his own heart breaking, but his anger still burned too hot to comfort her fully. Across the room, he turned on EJ, his voice rising with every word. "You ruined everything. Our adoption chances, our family, gone. And you expect me to believe you had nothing to do with Rafe?" EJ's expression shifted, a flicker of something. Guilt? Surprise? Crossing his face. "Wait a minute," he said slowly, as if struck by a sudden realization. "The man I hired to follow Jada? Could that have been Arnold?" He played dumb, his tone almost theatrical, but Johnny wasn't buying it. "So that's your story, huh?" Johnny spat, stepping closer until he was inches from his father's face. "I swear, Dad, if I find out you lied, if you're covering for the monster who hurt my mother, you'll never see me, Chanel, or our family again. You'll be dead to me." The words hung heavy in the air, a promise and a threat woven together. EJ stared back, unblinking, but for the first time that night, his confidence seemed to waver. Meanwhile, in a quieter corner of the mansion, Holly Jonas sat with Doug Horton, trying to ease his worries. "You can trust Tate," she assured him, her voice soft but firm. "He can keep a secret." Doug frowned, his weathered hands resting on his cane. "That boy keeps catching us alone, Holly. Why should I trust him?" Holly shrugged, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "He's too distracted with Mrs. Choi to care about us." But even as she spoke, the weight of the night's chaos pressed down on them all. The DiMera mansion, once a symbol of power and prestige, now stood as a battleground of broken trust and shattered dreams. Johnny and Chanel's hopes for a family lay in tatters, torn apart by secrets, lies, and a father whose shadowy past refused to stay buried. As the night drew to a close, one question lingered in the air, unspoken but deafening. Could this family ever recover, or had the damage been done for good?